Marcus Chan knelt on the cold metal platform, his hands bound behind his back with energy shackles that hummed with deadly voltage. The execution chamber aboard the Dominion flagship Eternal Glory was massive, designed to hold thousands of witnesses. Today, it held representatives from every major species in the Galactic Empire, all gathered to watch a single human die. The chamber's walls were lined with hollow cameras, broadcasting the event to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Admiral Vexstar, the Empire's supreme military commander, stood at the podium with all four of his arms spread wide in a gesture of triumph. "Citizens of the Empire," Vexstar's voice boomed through the translation devices worn by every species present. "Today we eliminate the last remnant of human resistance. This terrorist has killed over 3,000 Imperial soldiers with his primitive projectile weapons." Marcus kept his head up, staring directly into the primary camera. His dark eyes showed no fear, only a calm that unnerved even the hardened Imperial guards surrounding him. At 32, he had spent the last 8 years fighting a guerrilla war against the Empire that had conquered Earth and enslaved humanity. "Any last words, human?" Vexstar asked, his reptilian face twisted in what passed for a smile among his species. Marcus spoke clearly, his voice carrying despite the lack of amplification. "You made one mistake, Admiral. You assume I'm the last." A ripple of laughter went through the assembled dignitaries. The Empire had spent 5 years hunting down the remaining human resistance cells. Their intelligence networks confirmed that Marcus Chun, known as Ghost to his fellow fighters, was indeed the last significant threat. Vexstar raised his primary arm, and the execution device, a concentrated plasma beam generator, began charging with an ominous whine. "Your species fought bravely, I will give you that. But you were always primitives playing with tools beyond your understanding." "Sir," interrupted a communications officer, approaching the Admiral with obvious reluctance, "we're receiving a priority transmission on the Quantum Emergency Channel." "Not now," Vexstar snarled. "This broadcast reaches 400 billion beings. Nothing interrupts this moment." The officer's scales had paled to an unhealthy blue-gray. "Sir, it's from Admiral Cothran S. Fleet at the Proxima Station. They're reporting massive gravitational anomalies." For the first time, Marcus smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Vexstar's 4 eyes narrowed. Proxima Station was the Empire's primary military shipyard, located in what had once been humanity's Proxima Centauri system. "Gravitational anomalies mean nothing. Continue with the execution." "No, sir, you don't understand," the officer's voice cracked. "They're artificial anomalies. Something is pulling ships out of hyperspace." The smile on Marcus's face widened. He began counting under his breath, just loudly enough for the closest cameras to pick up. 47, 46, 45. Vexstar gestured angrily at the guards. "Kill him now!" But the communications officer was receiving more transmissions, his equipment crackling with overlapping emergency signals. "Sir, fleets across the Outer Rim are reporting the same phenomenon. Something is interdicting Imperial vessels throughout the galaxy. 38, 37, 36. Marcus continued counting, his voice never wavering. "What is he counting?" demanded Chancellor Mordek, the Empire's political leader. The insectoid being's mandibles clicked nervously as he stared at the calm human. Before anyone could answer, the Eternal Glory's own sensors began screaming warnings. The massive dreadnought shuddered as something impossible happened around them. Space itself seemed to be folding, creating gravitational eddies that no known technology could generate. 28, 27, 26. Lieutenant Commander Zaraki burst into the chamber, her usual composure shattered. "Admiral!" "Long range. Sensors are detecting massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace." "Ships, sir, thousands of them. Impossible!" Vexstar roared. "Our intelligence networks monitor every spacefaring civilization. There are no unknown fleets of that magnitude. Sir, they're human ships." The chamber fell into stunned silence except for Marcus's continued countdown. 18, 17, 16. Vexstar's facial scales shifted to a deep red, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. "Show me." The main display screen flickered to life, showing the tactical readout from the ship's long-range sensors. What they saw defied everything the Empire believed about human technology. Ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, not the crude, boxy vessels that Earth had possessed during the invasion, but sleek craft that seemed to bend light around their hulls. "They're using gravitational drives," whispered the sensor operator. "The energy output readings are—" "Admiral, each of those ships is generating more power than our entire battle fleet." 10998. Where did they come from? Chancellor Mordock demanded. "We destroyed their homeworld. We hunted down every colony." Marcus looked directly at the Chancellor, his countdown never pausing. 543, you destroyed the colonies you knew about. The truth hit Vexstar like a physical blow. "The generation ships. The ones that launched before we arrived. 210. At that moment, every Imperial ship in the Chamber's escort fleet simply vanished. Not destroyed, vanished. Their positions on the tactical display went from solid contacts to empty space in an instant. The communications array exploded with panic transmissions from across the galaxy. Imperial commanders reported the same phenomenon, human vessels appearing as if from nowhere, Imperial fleets disappearing without trace. "This is Admiral Sarah. Chion of the Human Expeditionary Fleet," a voice suddenly filled the chamber, transmitted on every available frequency. "You have 30 minutes to release all human prisoners and withdraw your forces from human systems. This is your only warning." Vexstar stared at the restrained human. "Chun, you're related." "My sister," Marcus said simply. "She was on the colony." "Ship New Horizon when your scouts first detected Earth?" "They've had 20 years to prepare." The Admiral's tactical officer looked up from his console, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, preliminary reports suggest we've lost contact with over 60% of our fleet. Ships throughout the Empire are simply gone." "Gone where?" Vexstar demanded. Marcus stood despite his restraints, the energy shackles sparking but not stopping him. "Would you like me to guess?" "Based on what I know about my sister's tactical preferences, I'd say they're probably suspended. In artificial gravity wells about 10,000 kilometers from your major population centers." "That's impossible." "No civilization has that level of gravitational manipulation technology." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "No civilization did, but humans spent 2 decades in deep space with nothing to do but think, build, and prepare for this moment. We learned some interesting things about physics when we weren't limited by planetary resources." Another communications officer stumbled into the chamber. "Admiral, priority message from the core worlds. The human fleet is. They're surrounding every major system simultaneously. They're demanding the immediate release of all human slaves and complete Imperial withdrawal from human space." "How many ships?" Vexstar asked. "Current count is over 50,000, sir." "And they're still appearing." The chamber erupted in chaos. As representatives from a dozen species began shouting demands and accusations. Through it all, Marcus remained calm, watching as the empire that had seemed so mighty moments before began to crumble under the weight of its own disbelief. "You want to know the really interesting part?" Marcus called out over the noise. "This isn't even their main fleet. This is just the advance force." Vexstar turned to stare at him, all 4 eyes wide with shock. Marcus's smile returned, cold and certain. "The main force is waiting in the space between galaxies, Admiral. They've been building for 20 years, waiting for the right moment. Waiting for you to give them a reason." The communications console lit up with an incoming message marked with the highest priority codes. The operator's hands shook as he activated it. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun again. You now have 29 minutes to comply with our demands. For your information, we currently have Imperial ships from 14 different sectors in our custody, including the crews. They are unharmed. Their continued well-being depends on your cooperation." Vexstar looked around the chamber at the chaos surrounding him, then back at the bound human who had somehow orchestrated the collapse of the galaxy's greatest military force. "How?" Marcus met his gaze steadily. "You conquered our world, enslaved our people, and hunted us across the stars. Did you really think we wouldn't find a way to fight back?" The Admiral's communicator chimed with another incoming message, this one from the Imperial capital itself. The Emperor's voice was strained with barely controlled panic. Admiral Vexstar, report your status immediately. We are considering the human demands. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vexstar found himself completely outmaneuvered. The execution that was meant to demonstrate imperial power had instead triggered what appeared to be the systematic dismantling of that same power. And the human responsible for it all stood calmly in the center of it. No longer a prisoner, but suddenly the most important person in the galaxy. Emperor Thaxlon paced the length of his command throne room, his massive crystalline form refracting the emergency lighting into harsh rainbows across the walls. The most powerful being in the galaxy, ruler of 400 billion souls across 1,200 worlds, was experiencing something he had never felt before: helplessness. Status report, he commanded, his voice creating harmonic resonances that would have shattered glass if any had been present. Fleet Admiral Kesvar, coordinator of Imperial Naval Operations, approached with visible reluctance. Her usual confidence had evaporated over the past 18 minutes. Your Majesty, we have confirmed losses of 68% of our active fleet. The ships haven't been destroyed. They've been collected. Collected? The human vessels generate localized gravity fields so intense they can manipulate spacetime itself. Our ships are being pulled into what our scientists describe as pocket dimensions, isolated pockets of space, where our vessels remain intact but completely cut off from normal space. The Emperor's internal light dimmed, a sign of deep concern among his species. And our response capabilities? Minimal, Your Majesty? Every time we attempt to engage the human vessels, they simply vanish and reappear elsewhere. Their ships move through space in ways that violate everything we understand about physics. They're not using conventional hyperspace, they're folding space itself. On the main tactical display, the situation grew worse by the minute. Red indicators marked Imperial assets that had vanished, while blue markers showed the positions of human vessels. The blue markers outnumbered the red by a terrifying margin, and more appeared with each passing moment. Meanwhile, aboard the human command ship Retribution, Admiral Sarah Chun stood before a holographic display showing the entire galaxy. Unlike the sterile, intimidating bridge designs favored by the Empire, the human ship's command center was designed for efficiency and crew comfort. The lighting was warm, the interfaces intuitive, and the atmosphere calm despite the magnitude of the operation underway. "Ma'am," reported Commander Jackson Martinez, her tactical officer, "all primary objectives secured. We have Imperial fleets from 23 sectors in containment. No casualties on either side." Sarah nodded approvingly. She was younger than her brother by 2 years, but 2 decades of deep space exploration had given her an air of quiet authority that her crew found reassuring. "Excellent. What's our timeline on the secondary objectives?" "Infrastructure suppression is proceeding ahead of schedule. We've isolated their primary communication hubs, military academies, and resource processing stations. The Empire is effectively blind and deaf at this point. And the civilian populations? Completely unaffected, Admiral. Our operations have been surgical military targets only, with full preservation of civilian infrastructure and zero collateral damage. This precision was possible because humanity had spent 20 years studying the Empire. The generation ships that had escaped Earth's destruction hadn't simply fled, they had observed, analyzed, and planned. Every Imperial military installation, every fleet deployment pattern, every communication protocol had been cataloged and studied back on the Imperial capital. Emperor Thaxlon received updates that grew more disturbing with each transmission. The humans weren't simply winning. They were demonstrating capabilities that suggested they had surpassed every known civilization in the galaxy. "Your Majesty," announced Minister of Science Qualareim, "our analysis teams have identified the source of human technological advancement. The generation ships that escaped the Earth invasion contained approximately 50 million humans, including many of their finest scientists and engineers. Continue. They've been living in deep space for 20 years, free from planetary constraints, without the need to support massive ground-based populations. They've been able to focus entirely on technological development. Moreover, the resources available in deep space, particularly rare minerals from asteroid belts and gas giant mining, far exceed anything available on planetary surfaces. The Emperor's crystalline form crackled with electrical discharge, a sign of extreme agitation. You're telling me that exile made them stronger? Exponentially stronger, Your Majesty. Our intelligence suggests they've developed technology at least 50 years ahead of our current capabilities. The gravitational manipulation alone represents a quantum leap beyond anything in our scientific databases. Admiral Sarah Chun's voice suddenly filled the throne room, transmitted through every communication device in the imperial capital. Emperor Thaxlon, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Liberation Fleet. You have 12 minutes remaining to accept our terms. Admiral Chun, the Emperor responded, activating the communication array himself. Perhaps we can discuss terms. Surely some accommodation can be reached. The terms are simple and non-negotiable. Sarah's voice remained calm and professional. Complete withdrawal of Imperial forces from all human-inhabited systems. Release of all human slaves and prisoners. Formal recognition of human territorial sovereignty. And reparations for the damage done to human colonies during your initial invasion. And if we refuse, then we continue this operation until compliance is achieved. Your choice, Your Majesty. The Emperor looked around his throne room at the assembled leaders of the Empire. Fear was evident on every face, regardless of species. Admiral, surely you understand that what you're demanding would effectively end the Empire as we know it. The economic disruption alone would be minimal, Sarah interrupted smoothly. Our analysis indicates that imperial expansion into human space represents less than 3% of your total economic activity. You can easily absorb the withdrawal. Minister Qualarim stepped forward. How can you possibly know our economic data in such detail? 20 years of observation, Minister. We've been watching, learning, and preparing. We know more about your empire than you do. The truth of this statement became apparent as Sarah began reciting imperial military deployments, economic statistics, and even personal information about various government officials that should have been classified beyond any security clearance. The choice, Sarah continued, is between a controlled transition that preserves the remainder of your empire or a complete collapse that benefits no one. We prefer the former, but we're prepared for the latter. Emperor Thaxlon realized with growing horror that the humans weren't bluffing. Their intelligence network was so comprehensive that they could probably predict imperial responses before the empire itself had made them. Admiral, he said slowly, what assurance do we have that you'll honor these terms? That you won't simply use your technological advantage to expand further? Because we don't want your empire, Your Majesty. We want to be left alone. We've seen what happens when civilizations prioritize conquest over development. We have no interest in ruling others. This statement was perhaps the most frightening thing the Emperor had heard yet. The humans possessed the power to conquer the galaxy, but they were choosing not to use it. That suggested a level of self-control and strategic thinking that made them far more dangerous than any conventional enemy. Fleet Admiral Kesvar approached the throne again, her expression grim. Your Majesty, I've received reports from our remaining fleet commanders. They're requesting permission to implement the Scorched Galaxy Protocol. The Emperor's light flared brighter. The Scorched Galaxy Protocol was the Empire's ultimate contingency plan, the simultaneous detonation of stellar manipulation devices that would trigger supernovas in key systems, destroying not only human forces but potentially billions of Imperial citizens as well. Denied, he said immediately. We will not commit genocide to avoid admitting defeat. Sir, with respect, we may not have a choice. The humans have demonstrated that they can neutralize our forces without significant effort. If we don't act now, Admiral, the Emperor interrupted, you're thinking like a conventional military commander facing a conventional enemy. This isn't a conventional situation. These humans have shown precision and restraint that suggests they're operating from a position of strength, not desperation. If we escalate, they'll simply escalate further. As if to prove his point, Sarah Chun's voice filled the room again. Your Majesty, we're aware of the Scorched Galaxy Protocol. Our intelligence networks have full details of your stellar manipulation devices. Should you attempt to implement this protocol, we will be forced to respond with equivalent measures. I trust you understand what that means. The Emperor did understand. If the humans could manipulate gravity at the level they demonstrated, they could probably trigger stellar collapse far more efficiently than the Empire's crude stellar manipulation devices. 8 minutes. Your Majesty, Sarah's voice continued. I should mention that my brother Marcus sends his regards. He's asked me to tell you that the execution you planned for him has become something of a galactic phenomenon. The broadcast is being watched by billions of beings across the galaxy, all waiting to see how this resolves. The Emperor realized that the execution, meant to demonstrate imperial power, had become a symbol of imperial impotence. Every moment that passed without a resolution made the Empire look weaker. Admiral Chun, he said finally, I need time to consult with my advisors. You have 7 minutes and 43 seconds, Your Majesty. I suggest you call. The final minutes ticked away in the Imperial throne room like the countdown to an execution. Emperor Thaxlon stood motionless, his crystalline form no longer refracting light but absorbing it, creating an aura of darkness that his advisors had never seen before. Your Majesty, urged Minister Qualarim, we must make a decision. Perhaps if we offered partial compliance. No. The Emperor's voice resonated with finality. Admiral Chun was correct when she said the terms were non-negotiable. Look at this situation objectively. They have demonstrated complete superiority in every meaningful category: intelligence, technology, strategic planning, and tactical execution. They have shown restraint when they could have shown overwhelming force. They have offered reasonable terms when they could have demanded unconditional surrender. Fleet Admiral Kesvar stepped forward one last time. Your Majesty, accepting these terms will be seen as submission. The Empire's credibility across the galaxy will be irrelevant if we no longer exist, the Emperor interrupted, which is precisely what will happen if we continue this confrontation. With 2 minutes remaining, Emperor Thaxlon activated the galaxy-wide communication array. His image and voice would reach every populated system in Imperial space, as well as the countless neutral worlds watching these events unfold. Citizens of the Empire, he began, his voice carrying the weight of millennia of imperial tradition. Today we have learned that the galaxy is far larger and more complex than we previously understood. The humans, whom we believed we had defeated, have demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally change our understanding of what is possible. On board the Eternal Glory, Admiral Vextar watched his Emperor's address with a mixture of relief and humiliation. Around him, the execution chamber had fallen silent except for the soft hum of electronics and the distant vibrations of the ship's engines. Marcus Chun remained standing despite his restraints, his expression thoughtful as he listened to the Imperial leader's words. I have decided to accept the terms offered by Admiral Chun of the Human Liberation Fleet, the Emperor continued. Effective immediately, all Imperial forces will withdraw from human-claimed territory. All human prisoners and slaves will be released and provided safe passage to human-controlled space. We acknowledge human territorial sovereignty and will begin discussions regarding appropriate reparations. The chamber erupted in chaos, but it was different from the panic of earlier moments. This was the sound of a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics, and everyone present understood they were witnessing history. Furthermore, the Emperor's voice continued, I call upon all member species of the Empire to view this moment not as a defeat but as an opportunity to learn. The humans have shown us that there are forms of strength beyond military conquest, and forms of intelligence beyond political domination. Admiral Sarah Chun's voice joined the communication network, her tone respectful but firm. Thank you, Your Majesty. Human forces will begin coordinating with Imperial authorities immediately to ensure a smooth transition. We appreciate your wisdom in choosing cooperation over conflict. Vexstar approached Marcus slowly, producing a key device for the energy shackles. "It appears you are no longer our prisoner," he said quietly. Marcus rubbed his wrists as the restraints fell away. "I was never really your prisoner, Admiral. I was exactly where I needed to be when I needed to be there. The execution was planned. The timing was planned. Your decision to broadcast it galaxy-wide made it perfect for our purposes." Marcus looked around the chamber, noting how the various species representatives were already clustering into groups, undoubtedly planning how to adjust to the new galactic situation. "You gave us the perfect stage to demonstrate that humanity could no longer be ignored or dismissed." Vexstar studied the human with new respect. "Your sister's fleet, How long have they been in position?" 3 months. "But honestly, Admiral, they could have done this any time in the last 5 years. We chose now because the Empire needed to understand that humanity had evolved beyond your ability to suppress us." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the immediate effects of the capitulation were becoming apparent. Imperial fleets that had vanished began reappearing in normal space, their crews unharmed but thoroughly shaken by their experience in the gravitational containment fields. The human ships that had orchestrated these captures were unlike anything in Imperial databases' sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around their hulls, powered by technology that treated the fundamental forces of the universe as tools to be manipulated at will. On the human command ship Retribution, Admiral Sarah Chun stood before her command staff, reviewing the successful completion of Operation Homecoming. "Excellent work, everyone. Begin Phase 2 immediately. Humanitarian assistance. I want medical ships dispatched to every Imperial prison facility that held human captives. Full psychological support, medical treatment, and transportation home." "Ma'am," reported Commander Martinez, "we're receiving thousands of communication requests from neutral governments throughout the galaxy. Everyone wants to establish diplomatic relations." Sarah nodded. "Route them through the diplomatic corps. Our priority remains getting our people home safely, but we should certainly establish proper channels for future cooperation." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's chief scientist, approached with a datapad. "Admiral, preliminary scans of the Imperial military technology we've observed suggest they're operating with equipment roughly equivalent to our capabilities from 15 years ago. The isolation period was even more beneficial than we projected. Any regrets about revealing our hand?" "None at all, ma'am. If anything, I think we showed remarkable restraint. The gravitational manipulation technology alone could have been used far more aggressively. Back in the Imperial capital, the aftermath of the capitulation was creating ripple effects throughout the government. Species that had joined the Empire primarily for protection were now questioning whether that protection was meaningful. Others were more interested in the technological advances that humanity had demonstrated. Minister Qualarim approached Emperor Thaxlon with a preliminary report. "Your Majesty, initial analysis suggests that accepting the human terms will actually strengthen the Empire in the long term." "How so?" "The resources we were dedicating to suppressing human resistance and maintaining control over their territory can be redirected toward more productive activities. Moreover, the humans have indicated willingness to share certain non-military technologies through controlled trade agreements." The Emperor's internal light began to brighten again. "They're offering trade?" "Apparently, Your Majesty. They seem genuinely interested in peaceful coexistence. Their technological advances in medicine alone could benefit billions of Imperial citizens." On the Eternal Glory, Marcus Chun was being escorted to a shuttle that would take him to the human fleet. Vexstar personally accompanied him to the shuttle bay. "I have one question," Vexstar said as they walked through the corridors that had been designed to intimidate visitors through their massive scale and harsh angles. "Why didn't your people simply conquer us? You obviously had the capability." Marcus paused at the shuttle entrance, considering his response. "Because conquest creates enemies, Admiral. Cooperation creates allies. We spent 20 years learning that lesson while you spent 20 years forgetting it. And now? Now we go home. We rebuild. We explore new worlds beyond the galactic rim that don't belong to anyone else. And we remember that the galaxy is large enough for everyone if we're smart about sharing it. The shuttle departed the eternal glory and made its way toward the human fleet, which had positioned itself in a defensive formation around the Imperial task force. As Marcus looked back at the massive Imperial dreadnought, he reflected on the events that had brought them to this point. The execution that was meant to eliminate the last human resistance had instead triggered the emergence of humanity as the dominant military power in the galaxy. But more importantly, it had demonstrated that true strength came from preparation, intelligence, and the wisdom to use power responsibly. 3 hours after the Emperor's capitulation announcement, the first groups of released human prisoners were arriving at designated pickup points throughout the galaxy. Many were weak from years of forced labor, but all were alive and would soon be returning to human space. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Retribution, watching as supply ships moved toward Imperial facilities to assist with the prisoner releases. Her brother's shuttle was approaching the main hangar bay, and she looked forward to seeing him again after 8 years of separation. The galaxy would never be the same. An empire that had seemed invincible had capitulated in less than an hour to a civilization it had believed extinct. But perhaps more importantly, humanity had announced its return to galactic affairs not as conquerors, but as a force for justice and technological progress. The execution of Marcus Chun had lasted exactly 47 minutes from the moment he knelt on that platform to the moment Emperor Thaxlon announced the Imperial capitulation. In those 47 minutes, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently, and the age of human expansion beyond the galactic rim was about to begin. As news of the event spread throughout the galaxy, one thing became clear to